how do we combat the inflammatory effect of eating sugar? What can we do? What can we add in? You see, when we consume sugar, it doesn't magically just cause inflammation in the body. Okay? Sugar, no matter how you look at it, is still going to be calories, and calories are going to cause an inflammatory effect. But where sugar is unique is that sugar can contribute to what is called an advanced glycation end product. So sugar will sort of caramelize proteins or fats that are in the blood. And it forms these caramelized things, just like if you were caramelizing an onion in a skillet, and it's called an AGE, advanced glycation end product. These AGEs then bind to a receptor, and when they do that, they trigger inflammation. So maybe you've heard of HbA1c before, your glycosylated hemoglobin. This is an example of how glycation affects proteins and things like that in the blood. So this is our best bet at understanding inflammation from sugar. And there's ways that we can combat it. So let's jump right in. The first one is pomegranate extract. Now it's interesting because pomegranate has sugar in it. So you'd think, well, this isn't gonna work. But if you go with an extract, it's pretty low sugar. So here we look at a study that was published in the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry. Now this was an in vitro and in vivo study. And full disclaimer, a lot of the things we're talking about today are very forward thinking. Like we're looking at a lot of mechanistic stuff, we're looking at rodent model stuff, because this stuff is simply too new to have large scale human trials. And that's why we're here on YouTube talking about it. So you can't 100% take it to the bank, but you can look at the research for what it's worth. And it's pretty simple things that you could implement that really have a high reward to risk ratio. So what they did is they put mice on a very high fat and high sugar diet to measure their advanced glycation end products. And they drove them way up. They drove their AGEs way up. And then what they did is they gave them pomegranate extract. They saw tremendous reductions overall in their serum advanced glycation end products. They saw a 22% reduction in their glycoalbumin. They saw almost a 6% reduction in their HbA1c. And then in vitro, when they tested all the different phenolic compounds in pomegranate, they found every single one of them reduced advanced glycation end products when it was in a petri dish. So there's something really, really promising there with pomegranate. Now, I also want to note that pomegranate has some interesting attributes when it comes down to mitochondrial function that can help us convert food into energy better. So there's something called urolithin A in pomegranate. Urolithin A is a compound that only like 40 or 50% of people actually extract from pomegranate, but it triggers the mitochondria to go through what's called mitophagy. This is where the mitochondria essentially consolidates and gets rid of useless components of itself to ultimately become a more stronger and efficient mitochondria. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. So you can get that from eating pomegranate. I also popped a link down below for a company called Timeline that's been a sponsor on this channel for years. And it's relevant to this topic, but it's also just something that you might be interested in. It's a 10% off discount link if you use code Thomas10. So what it is it is the specific urolithin A that is in pomegranate. So it has nothing to do with advanced glycation end products. It's not going to reduce inflammation. It's just an interesting compound that's in pomegranate that's worth mentioning. So they have it in a little powder that you can add to yogurt. They have it in a capsule form. You can take a protein shake that has it in. It's pretty cool stuff. Very, very interesting. I'll let them do the scientific talk. So if you click that link, you can kind of read about it and see the research behind it. But it's just worth mentioning. And they're a big sponsor of this channel, and they help us create the content that we create. So that link down below in the first line of the description. Next up is going to be quercetin. Now you're going to find quercetin in things like apples, in onions, in shallots, in asparagus, a heck of a lot of it in capers. That's one of the richest sources of quercetin. Quercetin is a flavanol. Now it has antioxidant properties. Now quercetin is normally known for helping our body create its own antioxidants, which is a very powerful thing. But in this particular case, it seems to have a big impact on AGEs. So there's a study published in BMC Complementary Medicine and Therapies that took a look at how quercetin directly impacts AGEs. They took a look at aminoguanide, they took a look at vitamin C, they took a look at green tea, they took a look at quercetin and a couple other antioxidants, and they found that out of all of those, quercetin had the biggest impact at reducing AGEs. It reduced total AGEs by 60.5% and high molecular weight AGEs by 79%. What does that mean in human terms? It means this stuff is potent at reducing the AGEs. So if you were having something sweet and you wanted to have like an apple or something with it, you could potentially combat the AGE effect quite a bit. You're still gonna have a glucose spike, okay? We can't get around that. Like, there's ways that we can mitigate that spike, but we can at least mitigate the downstream glycation effect, which is the more long-term effect. So if you're worried about your HbA1c, you're worried about the inflammation related with sugar, then these compounds could help tremendously. Now this next one is more about how we cook. So it's not about, hey, like, how do you take this Snickers bar and make it so it doesn't make you inflamed? This is more about, well, what happens after we eat other food? Because high blood sugar can cause inflammation as it affects other foods that we ate. So let's say we ate some protein and that protein became glycated. Well, that's going to trigger inflammation. So there's a study published in the Journal of the American Dietetic Association that took a look at like boiling, at broiling, at roasting, at deep frying, all different kinds of cooking methods at different temperatures. And what they found with this was that cooking eggs, for example, in an open pan at low to medium heat triggered 50% less AGEs than cooking the exact same way, but at high heat. And they found that poaching or steaming chicken, not that that's the most delicious way to cook it, ended up having 75% less AGEs than roasting it. So what we're seeing here is that how we cook our food makes a big difference. So even if it's indirect, how you cook your protein could impact how sugar is affected in your body. It's that crazy. It's almost always, invariably, better to cook low and slow. I can't think of any situations where it's good to cook under super high heat as far as health is concerned. And a 50% reduction in AGEs if the meat was soaked in lemon or had a lemon marinade, and 62% reduction if it was soaked in vinegar. That's how powerful this stuff is. Next up, we have vitamin E and D supplementation. Or if you don't want to supplement, we've got things like avocado, super high in vitamin E. Then we've got trout, we've got salmon, we've got eggs for the vitamin D. You've also got things like sardines and mackerel. Now, you're going to get more potency out of supplementation, but if you really want to eat solid, then that's going to be a good route. So how does this impact us? Well, vitamin E is well known as an inflammatory modulator. There's a study published in Scientific Reports that took a look at 33 trials with vitamin E supplementation and found that there was a huge reduction in CRP, C-reactive protein. So as far as just controlling inflammation, vitamin E is one of the best supplements for that. That and fish oil, but vitamin E really has a lot of research behind it. Vitamin D is even more interesting. So the vitamin D study was published in Diabetology and Metabolic Syndrome, and it took a look at two groups of type 2 diabetics. One group, they gave a control, or one group they gave a placebo rather. Another group, they gave 4,000 IUs of vitamin D supplementation. The vitamin D group ended up with 0.72-fold decrease in their AGE mRNA. What the heck? That sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook. Basically, they produced less advanced glycation end products at literally a genetic level. So even though it doesn't sound like much because it's not even a 1-fold, it's 0.72-fold, the fact that just having adequate levels of vitamin D allowed our body to deal with sugar and glycation better tells us a lot about vitamin D's impact on our overall metabolic health. So the takeaway from this is if your vitamin D levels are low, get them up, whether it's with food, supplementation, sunlight, just get them up. I think the net positive is better than the net negative. Lastly, this is an interesting route. One of the ways that sugar can trigger inflammation is by irritating the gut. Okay, when you have a high amount of inflammation in the gut, it leads to what is called gut permeability. Gut permeability is where basically the junctions in the gut become separated. So things can leak through the gut, and you have particularly what are called lipopolysaccharides, LPS. These leak through the gut and into the bloodstream and trigger the immune system to try to attack them. So introduce low-scale inflammation all the time, trying to combat these pathogenic materials that are leaking through the gut. Leaky gut is a real thing. It's just over-marketed and overhyped. But gut permeability is a more realistic way to put it. So sugar can trigger this and actually damage the villi within the gut when you get too much inflammation. So chronic inflammation occurs indirectly as a result of an irritated gut. Interestingly enough, there's a study published in Life Sciences that showed that fenugreek supplementation could be hugely beneficial here. So they took two groups of people. One was on a low fenugreek trial, and the other was on a high fenugreek trial. And they found the results to be fascinating. 20% reduction in interleukin-6 and interleukin-1 beta, 15% reduction in tumor necrosis factor alpha. Those are inflammatory cytokines. And that's the difference between the high and the low group. Additionally, they found that the high group, group that had more fenugreek, ended up having significantly less weight gain on a high-fat, high-calorie diet than the other group. So something's going on here that we don't really know with fenugreek. Perhaps it's anti-inflammatory, perhaps it's affecting the gut in different ways, but it's still very promising. And again, another disclaimer, none of this stuff is huge human scale trials. We're talking very new stuff that we're starting to unfold. But if you're in the world of biohacking and you want to learn this stuff and you want to implement these things, they're always worth a try. I'll see you tomorrow.